Morning.
Morning.
Morning, everybody.
Morning, Chief.
Morning.
Morning, George. We got you done.
George, are you actually in your office now?
Yes, sir.
Nice.
Why can you tell because of the big smile on my face?
Well, and the real, it looks like a real background.
Real background, yeah. Yes, sir.
Welcome back.
Yeah, man, it's nice to be back. It's energizing for sure.
Yeah.
Look at that. Mr. Shelton, it looks like we have everybody. Good. All right. So thank you all. I'd like to call the June 3rd, 2021 Fire and EMS Task Force meeting to order. Mr. Shelton, will you do a roll call?
Yes, Ms. Walsh,
She's here.
Mr. Tarlis,
Here.
Mr. Sanders,
Here.
Mr. Solomon,
Here.
Alderman Allen, present, and Alderman Mortland.
Present.
You have a unanimous quorum.
Thank you. Right. Starting off, the agenda was submitted. Any changes to the agenda at this time? And if not, can I have a motion to approve?
Ryan,
Yes.
excuse me, I have a comment. And I just am wondering if in the second paragraph, under review of feedback from Ways and Means, we have the,
Are you on the minutes? So can we get, that's next.
oh, I'm sorry,
Alderman
I'm-
Allen, it's okay. No, that's next.
Uh,
I'm getting the approval of the agenda first.
I'm sorry, go ahead,
Okay.
sorry.
I so move.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Amber. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Sanders, done. All those in favor, raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, the approval of the minutes was unanimous. All right, I mean, of the agenda, sorry. You got me confused. All right, so the second is the approval of the May 13th, 2021 minutes. Is there any discussion or if not, a motion to approve? Yes, Alderman Allen.
So I just reread the minutes and then I reread the draft of what we're going to be discussing today. And Bob and I talked about this earlier. So there were different numbers from the county and the census, correct?
Correct.
And so in the draft, and I'm not trying to go ahead, but I think it's important that the minutes are reflective, that it's clear that we have the right reference for where we got the numbers from. So you have the census in the first paragraph, 735, and then we go to, maybe I'm screwing this up. And then we are in the second document, the draft, we've said 700, but we also have the county at the different, we have the different rate from the assessment of the county and the census.
Yeah, and Sue, from the minutes standpoint, the last paragraph, last sentence of the first paragraph, I asked the census number to be verified. Would that handle that, Mr. Shelton?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So if that handles that, moving forward to our recommendation, we can look at the minutes as the meeting prior.
Okay.
Does that suffice?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. So
Want it clear that we're using, where we're giving out numbers, we need to show there's not, it's not all the same number, and we're working in between what we got from both numbers, both groups.
good point. Good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Is there anything we should add there, Mr. Shelton?
I don't know that we need to change anything in the minutes. When we get into the report, if there's any clarification in the report, I definitely am open to input.
We'll note that. Okay. All right. So is there a motion to approve the April 15th, 2021 minutes?
I move.
Or May 13th, sorry, excuse me. I'm looking at two things, May 13th. Thank you, Amber. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Don. All those in favor, raise your hand again.
Aye.
All right, unanimously approved. Thank you. So moving into the discussion and recommendation. So before we kind of get to the start of this, I want to kind of frame the path. So the path forward today, Mr. Shelton has provided us a narrowed down view of the options that we want to discuss. We want to pro and con. We want to communicate that what our recommendation is on moving forward. In that process, we want to try to give as much information or add as much detail. It might come back in another report that we review offline that we approve. But from a meeting standpoint, we're going to go forward with the recommendation. After that path, this recommendation will be front and center with the Board of Aldermen retreat. That is the end of this month. This will be the number one topic there. We'll go back before the Police, Fire, and EMS Commission, and it'll go back before the Ways and Means Commission. So that's the process. And at that point, if they come back with more recommendations or questions, we're going to probably handle most of that internally from a staff level for a period of time. So as we kind of go through that, that's kind of the path that I wanted everybody to understand as we make this recommendation that we'll be moving forward. So with that, Mr. Shelton, you want to go through the draft of the report that we discussed?
Yes, thank you, Alderman. Morgan, if we can go ahead and bring up the first page so everybody's looking at the same thing of the report. Thank you. So just to kind of hit some of the highlights in this narrative portion, a little bit of background in the first sentence. The second sentence talks about the initial goal of this task force, which was to look at the extension, which in cooperation with the fire district, we successfully did and the board authorized. I did note that extension included an increase in the 2022 agreement of approximately $40,000 in expense for capital. And that basically reflects what the fire district had shown over the 5 years. The city's contribution for capital expense had been below what the actual cost was for capital. In the next paragraph, obviously the task force, you all looked at a variety of prior reports and studies, comparable cities and services that are provided in other communities. We looked at tax rates paid in town and country, both residential and commercial. We determined that town and country is the only city without a property tax, fire safety sales tax, or not in a fire district. And when we looked at those numbers, that showed that the average town and country property, whether basically using our residential number, the cost of living was $1,000 less annually. So then in the next paragraph, we looked at, yep, I'm sorry. Yeah, any questions, please stop. Go ahead,
Please.
Sue.
Thank you. And just the last sentence, I think we left out costs. Okay, so you're talking about making average town and country property owner costs, or
Yeah.
making we left out costs.
Good point. Yeah, and please, anybody stop me at any time. I appreciate that. Yeah, that ought to be after property will include cost of living. Yep.
Thank you.
Good. So then in the next paragraph, we looked at response times. I added in here, and it probably went back farther than that, but the 1998 report which was 23 years ago, specifically talked about concerns with response times. Then the next sentence in that paragraph talks about the various scenarios we talked about and looked at, and the options to carry forward. Recognize that the fire district was involved in those discussions, as well as police, fire, and EMS, and the Ways and Means Commission. The next paragraph I want to spend a little bit of time on, that begins staff attempted to provide, which is at the bottom of the screen, estimated cost. The next sentence, any options selected would need to be fine-tuned. These are all estimated numbers. But I do want to focus on what Sue brought up and was in the minutes, and that is this value of what we're now using is $700,000 for the median town and country single-family residential property. And the way we've arrived at that is we were using 650,000, which is a number provided by the US Census Bureau. So the current US Census Bureau number is approximately 730,000 for the median town and country house. However, the Census Bureau cites that they have a variable plus or minus 30,000. The St. Louis County actual assessed average is 698,000. So I feel very comfortable, and I'm open to any discussion here using the median household of 700,000, which is blended between the county actual and the census Bureau. Any thoughts?
I think that's a wise to use the lower number.
No, I agree. And I just wanted it clarified how we got there.
Yeah,
But I
just
Agreed.
one other point, the St. Louis County assessments change, people challenge those. So I like using a comparison of both, to be honest. So, okay. And then just at the very bottom of that, I recognize all of you for all of your efforts throughout this process. So if there are no questions on that narrative, we'll go ahead and move to the option 1. Basically, all of this information is what we've been looking at, what we sent on to Ways and Means and to the Police Fire Task Force. We just recalculated to use the average of 700,000 and what that looks like. And then we tried to just put in a few benefits and downsides to each option. And so I thought really for today, I'll just kind of go through those. And if there's anything that you as the task force see that you think ought to be added or is not appropriate, please let me know. So option 1, as we all know, status quo, except did increase some staffing and made some improvements to the facility. The benefit, obviously we improved the facility functionality. We reduced some operating and utility costs, and it is the least costly option. And again, we just, currently all of the fire services paid out of general fund. We just appropriate a tax rate if this was being paid through a property tax. The downside, obviously, to keeping the current facility and operating just that facility, we don't make any improvements to response times. We still have a dependence on automatic aid outside agencies, which is not always readily available and that we could depend on. The ongoing cost to the city for building maintenance continues. There are still functionality concerns just with the older construction. And under this option, obviously, we still have to contract with the fire district or somebody for services. Any thoughts? Okay. Option 2.
Do we, quick question, with the staff increase, we are still confident that response times aren't improved. Obviously, there's multiple factors that go in there. I assume that that is a true statement. Obviously, we're not changing locations, but is that still a true statement with the increase of staff and other efficiencies?
That's correct. There will be no change in the response times based on staffing increase. We're not adding equipment. We're just adding a person.
Okay.
And Amber, I'm glad you brought that up because what we have, the chief provided us from Central County some estimated response times. And we will bring those up after each of the basic scenarios. So I'm working under the assumption, the chief will correct me if I'm wrong, both option 1 and option 2 are operating out of one house. So that basically would have the same response time. So we're going to pull up a map as soon as I'm done with option 2.
Amber, that's a really good question, and we've been asked that before. So yeah.
Okay. I assume that was the answer based on the prior information you shared, but I think it's important to be certain that we are certain. Thank you.
And I'd like to add too, early on in this process, I think, Chief, that we did have your information that the time that you all receive a call to the time, I don't know, you're in the truck driving out the driveway is a very exemplary, good time, right? So any delays are not in any way related to staffing.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Morgan, if you can go ahead and bring up option 2.
Bob, if you don't mind, Morgan, if you can go back to option 1. So how are we going to reflect, speaking to Amber's question, the benefit is we're actually right sizing with the staff, correct, Chief?
That's correct. We dropped 3 personnel. We dropped staffing with the previous contract prior to the extension. We're just trying to get back to that for manpower purposes.
So somewhere in the benefit, I know we don't really talk about manpower, and the benefit needs to show to effectively run the facility. I know improve, something is to right size the manpower. Okay.
Good point.
All right, Morgan, down to number 2.
Okay, so this scenario was build one new station, close the current station, and either sell or reuse that facility. So the benefits we list for this scenario are a new facility would improve function. The new facility would reduce the city operating and maintenance cost for the older building. Depending on location, could improve some response times. And the benefit is that this frees up the current station to sell or reuse. The downside is basically response times would only improve to some areas. The citywide response times and resources do not improve. We don't really add any resources. And compared to the other options, this was brought up at the police fire task force. They didn't believe that, or at least some of them didn't believe there was a cost benefit, the cost of this compared to the benefit that would be received. The way our geographic configuration is, there's no one good center of the city to relocate to. And then again, as all of these, it would require the city contracting for these services. Thoughts?
Go ahead, George.
I was just going to say, presumably, only some response times improve. There's likely to be some response times that decline as well, correct? Which I think we need to point that out.
Correct.
And
I
Bob,
think that was probably the point. I think that was probably maybe the point of bullet 2 downside, but maybe I think that's a good clarification. Maybe the distinction between citywide and some response times.
I have a, one of my questions is the board asking, how many options is the board asking for? Because option 1 and 2 is just a status quo for the most part. And option 2 is actually could have a pretty hefty cost, maybe not when you offset whatever we do with the existing building. But how many options do they want? I mean, if I go to the Cheesecake Factory, I'm not a fan of a menu that is 50 pages long, because it's going to take us forever with my kids and everybody to order. I'd rather get to the point and kind of, instead of adding debate to options that are negligible for us, is that something we should be doing at this point?
so Todd, good question. I was kind of asking the process, about to ask the process from Mr. Shelton, therefore. So we're going through the options to lay out what we talked about and
Right.
handle that. So we give a full brief to the commissions and also to the Board of Aldermen. We're going to, I'm assuming, Mr. Shelton, narrow this down to 1 or 2 options of recommendations at the end. So this would have a not recommended if we determine this is not recommended option.
Okay.
So down at the bottom of these, I kind of, we're going to say this, and then we'll have something on the task force comment.
Okay.
But good question. So any other options on or any other comments on benefits or downside? I think I just heard, citywide, I would put in here maybe a note or a question. It's not a benefit or downside, but just what Todd had just said with regards to, assuming a sale of the existing fire station happens to help fund this. Just from that standpoint. So it's probably not realistic, but if we ended up doing that, that'd be one of them. Okay. Anything else? Any task force commissioner or task force members? Anything else you'd like to add? Okay, going on to option number 3, Ms. Shelton.
Okay, so if what I'd like to do, Morgan, if we could hold just a second and pull up the response time map. And this is basically, as I said before, going to give us, and the chief, it's your show now on these, but I believe this is either option 1 or option 2, really. But
This is actually where the existing fire station is right now. So you can sort of extrapolate, if you shift the dot in the middle around just a little bit and use your imagination, the lighter the color is, the better the response times are. There's a couple of cutout areas that are white, but that just kind of off to the sides, just disregard those. But obviously the lighter the color, the faster the time. And if Morgan, I don't know if you have the ability to zoom that just a little bit, because you can, if you make it a little bit bigger, you can see the actual numbers. So 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, 4 minute, 5 minute, etc. And these are just average drive times based on GIS. So it's not necessarily taking into account traffic or anything like that. This is just geography. And these were, just for the record, so everybody's clear, and I apologize if you're aware of this, these were provided by Central County Emergency 911, which is the dispatch agency that we all this is independent information. We didn't make these maps.
And this also relates to both an ambulance and a truck?
This is just drive time and any vehicle. So it's average. So, if you're in a 60,000 pound ladder truck, it's going to be probably a little slower. This is just average drive time in any vehicle.
And then Chief, obviously the black line is our city limit.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, I have a question, and since we have this in front of us, and as we move for what the task force recommends, is improving response times a key factor that people are concerned about? And if response times are a problem for the majority of the group, I think that somewhere overriding most discussions, it's important that this document says a key factor of discussions is response times. And then costs and how we get there is almost secondary, because some people in the city might think, 7-8 minutes somewhere on these outlying areas, that's okay. They have good response times at their homes. So I think it's important to focus that we really did, if we did, have significant concern about response times.
And Morgan, can you zoom in a little more? Because I obviously see the upper northwest, but we were also talking about the southeast side for the numbers. Do the numbers go to the BOPE area? I mean, to the ballast?
I mean, you'll have to use the color grid. I don't think they were able to. I mean, you're at 8-9 minutes as you get, or 8 minutes as you get over toward BOPE.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
I think Sue's point is well made, and I've been thinking that we really probably want to weave in some of this data into the report, and probably also a bit about how mutual aid impacts that, because it'll be a natural question, of course, when you're on the outskirts, then do those homes get serviced elsewhere? So that's probably worth weaving in.
Yeah, Amber, good point. And most likely, we'll have a add-on to the first page with the response times and add these documents.
Mr. Chairman, if
Yes.
I may just add to it so everyone's clear, okay, as the chief already said, these are the response times just driving on a street with no traffic or anything. So I think if you were to look at the actual response times and that's been provided and overlay it, you'll see, even though it may be a 3 or 4 minute based on this color mapping, the reality it's a 6+ minute response time when you add in all the factors. So I just want to make sure that the task force is very clear on that and doesn't think that this draws a rosy picture that there are no response times issues within the community, because I think we've clearly already identified that.
Yeah, and we, Deputy Chief Frazier will be submitting the Central County response times. Thank you. Okay. Ms. Shelton, Bob, do you have anything else you wanted to?
Nothing else on this map. Alderman, if we can, we'll go ahead to option 3. Okay, so as you probably recall, we have a 3 and we have a 3 light. This was build 1 new station, fully staffed, fully equipped with a pumper or a ladder and an ambulance, continue operating our current station with either a pumper or a ladder and an ambulance. So the Cost you'll see again, all are the costs we've been using for, to build the station and to equip it and staff it, the 2 stations. So the benefit, response times improve. The other benefit, we have resources for multiple calls. So if the ambulance is out at one call, we have another ambulance available. Same thing with the pumper or ladder. We have some redundancy there. The downsides to this option 3 listed are city continues to maintain these facilities, including the one older facility. The cost to residents for this option, similar to an annexation cost. And this option requires contract for services to continue. And then also the existing station continues to have limited optimal response times because of its location if you were going to have 2 stations. Comments?
I think the previous slide that had, we don't have to go to it, the previous slide that had the map and it showed the response times. As we're talking about option 3, which is building a new station, and then the other options, which is building 2 new stations, it might help if we could create that map to show people kind of what we're talking about. Like if option 3 is we're maintaining the one we have, this is where we think a new building could go. This is how it's going to change the landscape of the response times with Town and Country. Then the option where we build 2 new ones, we show where we're recommending those 2 new ones go. And this is what it'll do to our response times. I just think we're talking in generalizations of improved response times, which is obviously that'll have that effect, but what is the effect and where approximately where is it located, these other locations? And that might also put people at ease if they are worried about, well, if we get rid of in the latter options, if we get rid of the building that we're currently utilizing and we get 2 new ones, is that now making, response time worse for people that had good response time? So if we could show them that it'll have a neutral effect for them, but it'll be a benefit for all, that might be okay. I don't know how difficult it is to redo that map and get factual information on it though.
So Todd, I think we're going to be able to show that today.
Okay.
And so what we've done, or what the chief has done, is provided us a map from Central County.
Got it.
Utilizing basically options 3 and 3 light, because they both assume we're going to keep the existing station and build a new facility. And then we'll look at a map showing 2 new facilities strategically located. Okay?
Got it. Okay. Perfect.
All right. So actually we'll, after we do 3 light, we'll bring up that map.
Perfect.
They
Right.
assume the same scenario, same
Good. Okay.
concept.
Okay. Yep.
So anything on 3 before we go to 3 light?
Proceed.
3 light. Basically, this is build a new facility that would house only a pumper or an ambulance. And just so we're clear, the chief has recommended if you're going to do something like this, it would be a pumper staffed with paramedics. That way, the ambulance is available for transport, but you always have a fire truck in case there is a fire for that response.
Can we add that note in a note section below?
Yes.
You comfortable with that, Chief
Put in
Zeller?
another-
Just
Yeah,
recommendation, a pumper instead of an ambulance?
right. And
Okay.
just so we're clear, there has been discussion in the community about, well, we have more EMS calls, right? And so,
Oh, most definitely. Most
Yeah.
definitely. So that was more the response, but the pumper will handle the EMS and they can respond, the ambulance can come too.
so then the benefits we list, response times and resources improve. It's less costly than annexation or than 2 fully staffed stations. And then you do still have resources for multiple calls. The downside, the existing station limits the optimal response times. The city continues to maintain both of these facilities, including the older facility. And then we still have to contract for these services and negotiate those. So now the map for these 3 and 3 light, and I turn it over to the chief again.
Yes. So what you see here is, and again, it's a little hard to see, but we can make these available for you guys to actually dig into if you'd like. But the bottom line is you still got the existing fire station where it is, and then we mapped out. This is the salt mill location, which obviously helps out a lot toward Ward 4 and Wards 3 and 4 are helped out a lot here. So again, if you kind of let that sink in, it helps a lot.
But it doesn't do anything for Ward 1.
Correct. As we've discussed.
Right.
And just for the record, we did not add any of the surrounding facilities just so you could actually see the impact to Town and Country for the resources specific to Town and Country. So these are your fire stations.
And Chief, you may have provided the map as well, but obviously to keep the existing station and move one over like towards City Hall, we still have, is that, yeah, thank you, Morgan.
Correct.
So this is another variation of 3 or 3 light. And
so this fixes Ward 1, not so much Ward 4.
right.
So what you're saying is you got to almost do two lights in order to fix the response time. So, okay. Any questions? Any comments? Nope. All right. Well, let's proceed. Bob, I'm going to work with you on the maybe the wording on the downside. Existing station limits optimal response times. Maybe putting in some kind of determination of, you know, Chief, if we did a light station, it sounds like you would prefer to do the west side of Town and Country.
Well, I mean, based on call volume, yeah, it's
okay.
But it's, you know, I think the discussions that we have internally, and we've had these conversations with this group as well, and I think one of the task force members stated it pretty eloquently that providing a balanced service across the city is really the goal. We realize that it's going to, you know, obviously this is a hot button issue, but the bottom line is there's right now we've got it's kind of the haves and the have-nots when it comes to the service we're providing. And what we're really shooting for is balancing that service across the city. So it's, I don't have.
You don't have to answer. That was good enough. That was good enough. Sorry, but Bob, I'll work on you know, some wording with you on the downside. Existing station limits. You know, just this solution doesn't create optimal response times across the entire city or something like that.
Absolutely.
Okay. You want to go to 4? I'm going to try to keep us on track time-wise too, if we don't have major questions, because I know we're going over some of these.
Okay, so option 4 was the city builds and operates 2 new stations, contracts for services. The, again, cost has stayed the same. The benefit we list is improved response times and resources. And with this option, the city does have some control over level of service and spending. So if you want to reduce basically what's being provided or close a station at some future time to save money, you could do that. The downside, it is more expensive than annexation for the city to take this on. And the city would be responsible for ongoing building maintenance and service contracts, even obviously for 2 new stations.
So the notes I would add here is we would not utilize the existing station and potentially sell property to fund this.
Okay.
Any other comments or notes?
I really like the sequence that this is presented in. I think the comparison between 3 light, and 4 is very helpful in that order. I think it really helps someone do a nice comparison.
And so, thank you, Amber. This is the, 4, 5, and 6 are the optimal solutions for response times. And so maybe going back to that comment of, balanced service across city, and using some of that terminology and the benefits. And then do we have a slide for scenario 4 for, probably not for the visual, as we're talking, like Todd said, for 2? There you go, Morgan, thank you. So it would be somewhere in that. Okay. So west side and east side. Okay, thank you.
That's correct.
So-
And this, just for the record, this does not show our station 2 on the south side of Ward 2 there on Manchester. So the darker colors on the south side of this map are going to be significantly lighter when you throw that in there.
So we would need to note that, Bob. So the south would be serviced by Manchester. Okay. If we add these visuals behind each option, I think that will help in the report delivery. And I think that's what you're planning on, Bob. All right. Anything else on option 4, everyone? Nope. All right, let's go to 5.
So we've combined 5 and 6 as we have during all of our discussion, really. And this is the utilizing basically the current tax rate. And this is either Dave or Chief, a little bit more current tax rate, I think, based on the most current assessed values for the fire district. But using the now 91 cents and then in 2024, the 84 cents. So those numbers came down a little bit since the last time we met. So the benefits that we list under the annexation proposal: fire districts responsible for all costs of building, operating, staffing, and maintaining all facilities and services. Fire district would be responsible for ensuring all service levels and response times are met. It allows for consistent service with other West County cities served by fire districts. The downside is it would commit residents and businesses to the ongoing fire tax rate and services. And again, your map, your response times would be the same as option 4.
Hey, Bob, are these the annual average estimated cost to residents? I see you bumped up for the $700,000 figure before we were looking at 600, right? Or 650.
Correct. We were
So
using
these.
650.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
You might want to note previous calculations were put in there at just for just down below. Any other comments on this?
Would this be a place to, and I don't know, to recognize that if this was to happen, then it would free up a few $1 million of city revenues?
It's a definite benefit.
Yep. Add that in there.
For people, other services to residents.
Another, Bob, another benefit to whether it's any of the latter options, not ladder options, would more than likely, and we can't guarantee it, but more than likely would improve ISO rating as well, and thus reduce insurance rates. We don't control, obviously, what ISO does, but based on what we've seen, we would go from a 2 to a 1.
So
And we're
insurance,
confident.
I'm sorry,
Oh,
Amber, what?
And we're confident that's only for the last 3 options, 4, 5, 6. Is that what you're saying? That we believe that to be the case solely? for
Yeah, I
those
mean,
options?
I think the problem with, I wouldn't want to speculate on option 3 or 3 light when it comes to that, because you've got Missouri Baptist on the east side that it would be, I'm pretty confident we would get it with 3 light, but I wouldn't, I'm much more confident with the, and it's, again, we don't control ISO, but that would be I'm strongly inclined to guess that. Dave, you have any comment on that?
No, I think you're spot on, and it would really affect 4 and 5 here. So.
Any other comments on 5 and 6?
Yeah, I have a couple comments. So the first comment would be, unlike the other options, this one lists 1 bullet under downside. And if that's what we're trying to convey, that this is the preferred option, then I think it's doing that. If we want to be perhaps a little more specific as to any other downsides, like we've talked about, I think Don's brought up the issue like within Frontenac that they want to maintain complete control of everything that they're doing, have their names on the truck and all that kind of stuff. Do we want to make specific mention? I know this bullet point talks about it more broadly, but specific mention that all decision making is pretty much out of the hands of the city, so to speak, or most of it.
Yeah.
With respect to control. So do we want to add something there? And again, I think if the recommended course of action is this one, then it's pretty, I think it's communicating that, because we list a whole lot of upside and not much downside. And I'm fine with that if that's where we're landing, but to me, that's what it's leading to. So that's probably more of a question for the group than a statement.
Amber, Todd, and Don, any thoughts to that?
I think that's an appropriate note to add. I think that's very, very fair.
I actually have one question kind of parlaying into that. If we get annexed into the fire district, Town and Country still owns the facilities, right? So what is, if someone could just briefly explain to me, being annexed, I understand we're handing over the fire and safety services over to, handing it over, but since we'll still own the facilities itself, does that still give us an option down the road to, because no one knows what the future is going to be. And I imagine we might have some people who say, hey, we're spending all this money building these new facilities and we're going to hand them over to a third party of sorts. Why not explore us opening up and like Frontenac does and have our own fire district and our own stuff like that. So I'm not saying we do that. I'm just saying there'll be some people that don't want to give up control once we've made the capital expense. So being annexed, does that limit us to our future, making any changes to the future service?
Todd, under the annexation proposal, we would not own the building. We would not own the building.
So we're building the buildings and then we hand everything over.
We would not build them. Under option 4, we would build and own. Under 5 and 6 with being annexed, they're their buildings.
Give them the land, basically, right? We deed them the land.
Assuming that it would be at the city hall facility and a portion of Salt Mill, we do own some property, correct? Yeah. But the building, I would not assume the city would own any building or have any responsibility for the building.
Well, we'd have responsibility for the maintenance of the buildings.
Oh,
No, only on 4. At 5 and 6, it's all.
This is turning the keys over,
Yeah.
A to Z.
Well,
Mr. Chairman,
so- Go ahead.
if I may, just also, since we're looking at some of the benefits, remember if the voters were to elect to join the fire district, then one of the benefits would be that a resident could run for the fire district board of directors as an elected position. So I think that is a good benefit, since we're looking and kind of discussing some of the control ideas and factors, whether they're perceived or real, that that's a big benefit that the residents don't currently enjoy or have.
Right. In essence, we are paying for it through tax. We're talking about a tax. So in essence,
That is correct.
right. In essence, we're saying moving forward, we're not, we're handing over the keys. It's your responsibility. Maintenance and upkeep moving forward is on you guys, not on us. But in essence, it is on us with the tax,
Well,
ongoing tax as well. So I'm just saying people like to control things, especially when you're spending a lot of money to do something. And we're telling people you're going to raise your property taxes. Some people are going to raise property taxes $1,200. Some people might be $2,000 a year. So they're going to want to know, it's great we have these services, but what is the checks and balances to make sure that you guys are appropriating the funds properly? And then are we looking at another tax increase in the near future, because things were misallocated or wasn't calculated? I mean, I just think when we do a presentation, we need to kind of button it down a little bit. I know that's what this is all about. These meetings are about, but it's just something to think about on that.
yeah, I mean, my statement is that as a governmental agency of the state, that obviously we follow all the guidelines such as the city does with annual audits, and we're always scrutinized and reviewed on our expenses as compared to revenues, and how are we managing those fiduciary responsibilities. And all I can say is our track record is exemplary, and it's what it is. It speaks for itself. And I'm sure that if our fiduciary responsibilities were not in order with what the city would maintain, our 35 plus years contract agreement would not be that long. So I think if we were complete failures in how we managed our fiduciary responsibilities, that we wouldn't even be at the point we're at today. So just a personal comment on that.
and I think just to add on to that, I think the real checks and balances tie into board membership, as we discussed. So that's Todd running for the board of directors and actually voting on the budget, and having that direct oversight.
So nominated.
There you go.
Second. So,
Okay.
no,
Okay, so if we are going to recognize what we were just talking about as far as the control, and I'm not giving an opinion personally on that, then under maybe 3 light and 3, shouldn't we have a benefit philosophically that the city does maintain control of those services or would still the way it's gone in the past still be contracting, but the city would not be giving up the control currently.
I think that makes sense on every option, that we have some common threads on benefits and downside, which is control, costs, ongoing maintenance costs, that kind of stuff. We should probably have the same categories of a few of those things for every option so that they can be laid out linearly.
I also think on option 5 and 6, one of the benefits is, Town and Country, there's a benefit of their existing building. I mean, whatever we do with that is, if we sell it, if we repurpose it or something, I mean, now the existing building is a benefit as opposed to a liability, because we're obviously not going to maintain it or keep it as is.
Good point. Any other comments here? Mr. Shelton, I know you have the last, which was the last slide, which we went over. Is there any change to that? That you just moved everything to the 700K?
That's it exactly.
Okay.
And the rate for the fire district is the current assessed, I believe, and Dave or the chief could correct me. So that's been.
I believe that's the, based on the preliminary assessments released from St. Louis County, as in comparison with the other adjustments made in all the scenarios above.
Okay.
And whether or not, whatever we do, I think it's important to recognize that we are looking at any and every scenario is potentially going to add a cost to city residents, either through property tax or through annexation. Is that clear? I mean, is that so?
I guess my opinion would be the only option would be if somehow you could finance 1 and 2 under existing revenues. But I think, as we have shown the board in the previous years, as sales revenues decline and other expenses increase, we've had, very, very, very tight budgets even pre-COVID. So it would be difficult to make any improvements to the building, enhance any level of service with our current general fund or capital revenue.
So you can craft the wonderful statement that's clear to everyone, right? And he smiles.
I'm wondering, not to throw a monkey wrench in, but I'm wondering if, Sue, you had talked about with COVID and the reduction in sales tax revenue, some modest property tax to residents that got knocked down before you could even get the whole sentence out of your mouth.
We did not get a second. Yes, go ahead.
But I'm just wondering if there is any, if we should, just to augment this whole discussion, if we should try to make any case at all for the ancillary benefits of the tax to residents on just the budget itself, notwithstanding this stuff. So you talked about the $4 million it frees up and all the things that the city can do with that, but just looking at recent budgets and your comment that you just made, that there's stress on the system already. So
there is, and those are the questions. If and when there's really a good feedback from Ways and Means, those are the questions that will come about.
It just feels like that can be an added push for this whole matter, that, look, we're trying to fix this, solve this one issue for the long term with regard to fire and EMS, but notwithstanding this issue, we've got a budget stress anyway, by virtue of the fact that we don't have a tax. And here's the data. Here are the numbers for the last decade and what the projections are for the forthcoming decade. We got stress on the system anyway, and we're trying to solve this issue. So this is the case we're trying to make. Maybe add that into the equation in one way, shape, or form. Just a thought. I'm not trying to muddy the waters, but it seems like that might help, because we've talked about this a lot. Going from 0 to something pretty significant on a tax sim was a pretty hard sell,
Right.
particularly for people that don't perceive the issue that there's something broken and that they don't even know they're not paying a tax now. So that might be something that we just add into this whole equation. Again, not trying to muddy the waters, but it seems like it could help the case.
Well, that presents the whole picture of information. Yes, I agree.
And I was actually thinking something similar in the preamble, where we state on the very first page, we state the mission of the task force, but perhaps to also state this, what is the current state of affairs on a variety of factors. So I think that would be helpful. And in a similar vein, not to muddy the waters, but I have a question probably best answered by the alderman. Is there any presently discussed initiative that this task force may not be aware of for which our buildings may have use? The existing station buildings. Yeah, I'm not aware of anything myself, but if there were, that would be an interesting element to this, because our buildings could then be repurposed for some other initiative rather than sale.
I'm not aware of anything. Brian, Bob?
I'm not aware. I mean, the discussion has happened. It's all, just discussion, what hypotheticals.
Okay, thank you.
I would just throw in real quick, Amber, if it helps clarify. The existing facility was obviously built specific to be a fire station. The parking, the layout, the design, the hose tower, the bunk rooms, the bays, it's not the type of building that an office user could just move into, right? Or, yeah,
Of course.
the reuse purposes are not readily available. So I wouldn't expect a big, if we're talking about a revenue number from a sale of the property, I don't expect a reuse. It's not readily available for reuse either.
Okay, and so this actually does, in my opinion, point up the fact that real discussion at some point when we take this back to the commissions, I believe you're going to have the thoughts and comments from Ways and Means very differently, and that's why I believe it's very incumbent to have commissioners of police, fire, and EMS in the same room, listening, having to listen to, and the same with Ways and Means, getting to listen to the concerns of the other commissions, because Ways and Means looks at things very differently than does police, fire, and EMS, and I agree. And they both have valuable missions, but I think they need to be able to fully see and synthesize both aspects of what we're trying to deal with.
So Sue, that's a good point. I think we can talk with Mr. Shelton and see what's available in that conversation and how to have that. So going back to the preamble and some other areas, I think that from the second to third, we need a transition to the revised mission. Obviously was the renewal of the contract, and then was to look at the long-term area, and then why are we doing this? The why is why we continue to look at what is the optimal solution, and then sometimes you have to look at the best alternative, and then go to budget and decision making from there. But why we're looking is there is gaps in service. We do not have a balanced service across our city and across all residents, and stating that. So, you know, Bob, I might work with you on changing the flow of the first page. Okay. All right. Any other comments? I do agree with having consistent benefits and downsides that are throughout.
In the past, we've talked about Town and Country needing a facility to house their equipment, and we also we're talking about police substations, perhaps in locations that we rebuild. Maybe one of the last topics, as far as a benefit, is freeing up millions of dollars every year if options 5 or 6 are selected, could help facilitate, as well as the sale of the current existing building, could help facilitate some of those additional needs or something like that as well. So I think if we parlay, to George's comments, if we parlay the advantages of doing this, not only for facility and safety reason, but also fiduciary responsibility, you know, it might gain some additional traction too, because there's always people like George said that feel like, well, it's not broken, why fix it? You know, obviously, you know, we talk about why it is broken, but here's some additional added benefits outside of just the firehouses that could, you know, parlay into this. I just think we could solve multiple problems with the resolution to this topic.
Thank you, Ted. Okay. Bob, how would you do? Any other comments for Bob, or Bob, how would you like to proceed on this part of the agenda?
So I think I've gotten some excellent feedback and I appreciate it very much. I would say the only thing is if, as Todd had mentioned before, there's anything that this group wants to say at this point as you move it to the board that you don't want to recommend moving forward. But other than that, I think I've got some cleanup and some improvements to make, and there's been excellent feedback.
Okay, thank you. So we can do it one or two ways. We can go to what do we recommend, you know, optimal and best alternative, or we can go through the process of elimination and say what we don't recommend. Does anybody have a preference? George, Don, Amber, or Todd? I think let's easily, I feel like, you know, the going through eliminating options is kind of the first thing which would help. Is there any option that we would eliminate from our immediate consideration?
I think option 3 is the first most obvious to eliminate, because as compared to option 4, it seems to have some negatives and a similar cost. I think that's the first easy.
Everybody agree with that? I'm getting the yes from Don, George, Todd. All right, so Bob, on end of option 3 is task force recommendation not recommended to move forward. Okay.
I'm going to assume that based on the sort of the climate, I would say option 4 would be one of the more obvious ones to avoid, to omit at this point.
Does the rest of the task force members agree with that?
I struggle more with that one, actually. And to me, option 4 actually seems quite viable. But I am less in tune, I guess, with the climate. So when it comes to actually the option as a standalone option, it
Mhm.
seems extremely reasonable and is actually my preference.
Yeah, I would add to that. I don't know that it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I kind of have the blinders on too. Amber, to your point with regard to the climate and the thinking of the aldermen and all that kind of stuff. But to me, everything up until 4 are less reasonable and viable to me. And then 4 on are the more ones that we should be considering. So I wouldn't be, it seems like 4 is the only offset to 5 and 6 that is reasonable to me. If we're doing what we're being asked to do as a commission,
Okay.
that's where I sit.
Okay.
Having no real perspective on reality, Sue.
Well, and I'm coming from a different place and
Right.
I
Yeah.
appreciate, and I mean, otherwise you keep kicking, I don't know, you keep beating the dead horse or kick the ball down the road. And this would be good. And I'm just considering what I believe I will hear back from.
What you
others.
already know. Yeah.
Amber, so George went through and said 4 and 5 and 6. You said no on 2. What are your thoughts on 1 and 3 and 3 light? Do you have it? I'm going to go through each one of you.
For me? Was that a question for me, Ryan?
Yes, please.
My personal preference, I think, is 4. I think 5 and 6 could be viable options. I think 3 and 3 light are not, with 1 and 2 being somewhere above 3 and 3 light.
Okay. Todd?
I think anything, I have not in the past year that we've been meeting or talking, heard anything whatsoever that states that the current facility we have is a viable option. So I think anything that involves our current station should just be removed because that's not the cost, the functionality, the limitations, the coverage. I mean, it's not even an option as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I haven't heard one positive thing about it in 12 months. So,
Yeah. And we're also looking 10 years out, 20 years out, is this,
Yeah.
and so it's only going to get
right.
more of a problem. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So you had that, and then Don?
I agree with everyone. 4, 5, and 6. I agree with that.
Okay.
Mr.
So-
Chairman, if I could
Yeah.
just clarify one thing as we're talking, kind of just to clarify for everybody when it comes to one of the points that was made about control and the tax rate, and the impression that I guess I got, and maybe I'm reading the room wrong, is that there's the thought process that there's the ability of the fire district to unilaterally just raise the tax rate at our whim. And if the residents of the city were to vote to join the fire district, they would also have to vote on any proposed tax increase. So when you see these tax rates that we've been displaying over the last 12 months, you'll notice that they continually get less because through Hancock and through the improvements we've made to our bond payment schedule to reduce our debt, thereby lowering our tax rate, that number keeps getting less and less. If we're to raise the tax rate, we would have to put it in front of all of you if you were to join the fire district. So it's not, just to be clear, and I assume that you understand that, but it's not something we can just do. And I just want to be very clear in that, and that the control of the fire district or your services we would be looking to improve them, not bring them down. So I'm happy to entertain any questions if I've raised any with that. But I just want to be very upfront about that.
Chief Sadler, I appreciate that. And I agree with everything that you've said. I'm just thinking, I'm playing devil's advocate to the residents of Town and Country. People don't like to spend a lot of money and feel like they're losing control. That's all. It's just human nature. So the only reason why I'm bringing it up is so we're prepared with talking points.
Sure.
During those discussions, and that's not something that blindsides us.
No, I agree with you. And I guess to your point, when you're talking about dollars, and that's really what this is. We're talking about we're talking about the services to the city, but we're also talking about the expense associated with it. And the real question comes down to what is that control worth when it comes to the dollars? And I think we've had this discussion a few times. So it's, and that's a question that I can't answer. You guys can.
Chief, how many people are on the Fireboard right now currently?
Right now, 3.
Thank you.
And would that remain the same if this joined, or would that change?
As it stands, it would stay the same. Obviously, anybody that wanted to run, you could always run for a position, and those are always up.
Okay.
I have one other question. I think this goes back to what George was saying earlier as far as timing. I just got a letter in the mail from Town and Country late last week on my assessment. So I'm sure everybody else is going to get theirs soon. Mine went up substantially. Is the timing of this now that everybody's going to be receiving those letters and the assessments, that's clear does not work for us. So, we're talking about a percentage of your tax assessment is going to be a factor. So we're saying 700,000 is the median. Now we're going to add some fuel to that fire and say, oh, by the way, now we're also going to install a tax. I'm just talking out loud. I just think we need to, whenever you talk about raising taxes or adding a tax, you are essentially kicking a hornet's nest. So we just have to be prepared for that. I mean, I'm just talking out loud on it because I don't think it's going to go over well. It's a necessity. It needs to be done. I totally get it. And I think I think ultimately people will, but this is not going to, I don't foresee this as an easy trot getting it done. So.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that's why I really believe the more we can tie this to the greater good beyond just fire EMS, not to have this creep of our mission, but to try to augment the case for what it really does for the city overall and the residents. In other words, what are we going to gain from it? We're going to gain better fire EMS safety and coverage and all that stuff, but we're also getting these other ancillary benefits of budget freedom and things that we can do on top of all of that. And I think the more we can make that case, the easier, the less difficult it's going to be. There's no question it's not an easy, it's a tough hill to climb.
But I mean, ultimately it has to be done. So it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter really the cost. I mean, it's really not a cost basis. It's just, we have to get people off that mindset because but we don't have options. I mean, we went through options, so ultimately we really don't. I mean, there really is no option that doesn't include an increase in cost, period. I mean, so.
Yeah, and I'm not sure in the preamble, I'm not sure what the whole thing's going to look like in the end, but just showing the last 10 years or the last 20 years to current day, what the stress on the system is in Town and Country with all the assisted living and all the businesses and all the call on the resources, what's happened over the last 20 years and what's forecasted to happen the next 20 years. Again, status quo isn't good enough. You need more resources, and you got to pay for them. And so, you know.
In the presentation, we will be showing those previous slides.
Yeah.
So
Okay, good.
that will, it won't just be the standalone document, it'll be incorporated with it. If you know, I mean, if it's not a today's decision, it's a tomorrow decision. It's, you know, I mean, you know, long-term, as a city, we need to start planning. And that's why we're here. Because without a plan, we won't be prepared. So I think what we've heard, Alderman Allen, do you have anything else to add at this point?
No, the only thing I'm thinking about, and George or Todd asked a question, what else would be out there? And just the fact that, you know, we did talk about earlier, hopefully getting some forwards and some statute so that we could go for a public safety tax like De Pere and some other cities have. But it doesn't seem, okay, that would be, it could be viable if we were annexed and if we got that done. Now, we've tried it twice. This could have been a better year to have that happen, but even under better scenario, this year it didn't happen. Last year it wasn't going to happen because of COVID. I mean, that's still something that could come along the way. And so if that ever happened, hopefully it can, that could, or Bob, could that then, if we could collect that tax, and if we had already been annexed, what impact is that? It certainly could impact us if we continued with the contracts.
So if you were able to change the state law, correct? Yes, and you continued to contract, you could put before the voters the fire safety sales tax. That would not cover the cost. It would be less than $1 million annually. And as we all know, we're spending $4 million.
Right.
So it could definitely help offset it. If you could change the state law, if the voters approved a sales tax for fire.
So there's still a lot of ifs there. And first one is getting the words passed. And
Correct.
if people don't like it, and the legislature, General Assembly, they don't like to add taxes. So that's one of those scenarios that really doesn't help too much in the law. It doesn't solve the problem for us. Okay.
Okay, so Mr. Shelton, we'll revise a draft, and I do think we need to have attachments. Obviously, those visuals, and then the previous, you know, whether addendums or attachments that we've gone over in the past. So as we go back to the board and the retreat and go back to the commissions, they have all of the data, whether it's in one or two documents, so they can reference it, so they see the bigger picture. Is it safe to say at this point, you know, the task force recommendation would be 4 or 5? We need a verbal, so.
Yes,
That's what I am.
yes.
Yes, yes.
Yes, 4 or
Okay.
5.
4 or 5. So looking towards an optimal solution in that, and so we can move forward in that. Obviously, you know, this will go to the board. It will go to the Ways and Means and the Police, Fire, and EMS Commission. This isn't, you know, something that happens overnight. Obviously, there's a lot of things as people talked about climate. It talked about the current station currently not being ideal. In the future, it will be even more unideal and not feasible. But looking at it from a standpoint of this will begin a path that, you know, that we have to solve. In the meantime, Chief Sadler, and City Administrator Shelton and Mayor Ream will be working on the contract extension and moving forward, because this won't be built in a day, or even, obviously it might not be approved. So as we move forward, we're going to update this. If you don't mind, instead of reconvening on a meeting, if you can comment back as we get this was the draft version. We work on a revision and get it to you next week. We have like a week between that. The 23rd is the Board of Aldermen meeting, and then Sue, I was looking for the next Ways and Means.
We have one tomorrow.
We probably won't be. I mean, we can have a discussion, but I don't know if we'll have that ready tomorrow. And then the next one is in early July, correct?
Yes, and that will be the challenge to Bob tomorrow, because people there feel they've had minimal information. They want it, but again, everything is incomplete as we move forward. So timing is going to be important. I think getting this to the board will be good, and hopefully I will implore people to be patient as we move
Chair,
forward.
if I could back up just a second. I think for the record, it will be better if we actually had a motion and a vote. I appreciate everybody's acknowledgement, but then our record can clearly reflect what the will of the committee.
Thank you for helping us with process. All right. So to state it, so the motion for the task force recommendation to be either option 4 or 5, is that valid, Bob?
Good motion.
So is there a motion on the floor for that in that statement?
I'll present a motion on the floor for options 4 or 5.
Is the task force recommendation?
Correct.
Okay. And then George, you're going to second. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
So I'm not sure, Amber, did we get you on that? Okay, sorry.
Definitely approved.
Okay. All right. So is that satisfied?
Any opposed?
Any opposed? Thank you.
As Chairman of Ways and Means, at this point, I will say opposed.
Okay. Okay. We good, Ms. Shelton?
You're good.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So the request is we get back. It's one more dive into the documents. You send any updates that you'd like to add to the documents. At this point, Mr. Shelton, with regards to a next date, I'm not certain we need to schedule a next meeting, or if we take it to the Board of Aldermen and the Ways and Means and Police, Fire, and EMS Commission, they'll come out of it. There might be an email or two, but from that point, the task force has fulfilled on the purpose, the mission of coming up with the long-term recommendation. And I just want to thank each and every one of you for a lot of time, a lot of meetings. Sure, this won't be the end, because there'll be questions and there might be a request to help in the future, but there's no obligation. This is something that each of your opinions, your viewpoints, and your thoughts, and your expertise, and your talent has really helped us kind of go through these logically, and just overall from a financial and how do we take care of the city. So I appreciate it. And
I would like to, I did feel like I needed to be a nay on that for the record. I do appreciate all the thoughtfulness and the integrity and the foresight that these discussions have brought up. And I have a lot of respect for this task force, and I appreciate it. And thank you.
Okay. with that, is there any other items, Mr. Shelton?
None that I have.
Okay. Deputy Chief Frazier and Chief Sadler, thank you for all your input and obviously your service to town and country and trying to continue to help us take care of our residents. So,
Well, we appreciate being invited, and I can't tell you how much we appreciate everybody donating their time and to your point, intelligence and integrity to the process. So thank you.
most
Yeah,
definitely.
Thank you.
You guys have been
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you very much for all the time you've committed.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we will send out the revised recommendation and still in draft form. And then after any comments back, we'll finalize that for the June 23rd Board of Aldermen retreat. If there's anything else, Ms. Shelton? Nope. Okay. And so if we have a motion to adjourn,
Motion to adjourn?
thank you, Don. George, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Say aye.
Aye.
Thank you all for your time, talent, and overall viewpoints. We appreciate it.
Have a good day,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.